I never thought I'd hear my mother tell me that a wedding dress was more important than her own daughter, but that's exactly what she said. That morning, I woke up before sunrise, just like always. I had a long day ahead, making breakfast, getting my son ready for school, then heading to work for a full shift at the hospital. But the moment I tried to sit up, a wave of dizziness hit me. My head pounded, my throat burned, and my entire body felt like it was weighed down by bricks. I pressed a hand to my forehead, burning hot. I had no time to be sick. Swallowing the pain, I forced myself up and walked to my son's room. Noah, time to wake up. He stirred under the blankets, his dark hair messy against the pillow. Slowly, his big brown eyes opened, instantly locking onto my face. Mom, are you okay? His voice was full of concern. I forced a smile. Just a little tired, sweetheart. Let's get ready for school. Noah had been in a wheelchair since the accident 3 years ago. He had been just 9 years old when a reckless driver ran a red light, leaving him unable to walk. Since then, every morning had been the same, helping him transfer to his wheelchair, getting him dressed, making sure he had everything he needed before heading out. It wasn't easy, but I never complained. He was my son. My responsibility. At breakfast, Noah frowned as he watched me struggle to pour his juice. Mom, I really think you have a fever. I brushed it off. I'll be fine. I'll rest after work. I dropped him off at school and was halfway to the hospital when my phone rang. Mom, I already knew what the call was about before I answered. Linda, she said in that sharp, impatient tone of hers. The date for Caroline's dress fitting changed. It's next Wednesday. You should be there. I sighed. Mom, I work on Wednesdays. Besides, Caroline doesn't want me there. Always. Making excuses. She sounded irritated. We're family, Linda. This is your sister's special day. My sister. The perfect daughter. The one who could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the disappointment. A single mother, raising a disabled child. An embarrassment to them. I really can't take time off, I said firmly. Fine, my mother snapped. Forget I asked. The call ended. At the hospital, my fever worsened. By the time I arrived, I could barely stand. You look terrible, my coworker Jenna said. I'm just a little under the weather, I tried to joke, but my vision blurred, and the next thing I knew, Jenna was holding me up before I collapsed. Minutes later, I was in an exam room, listening to Dr. Patel tell me what I already knew. Linda, you need to rest for at least 3 days. Your fever is dangerously high. But I can't, I protested weakly. Noah. You can't take care of him if you collapse, he interrupted. I swallowed hard. But I don't have anyone else. Don't you have family? Family. I almost laughed, but I had no choice. I had to call them. Dialing the number, my hands were shaky from the fever, and the fear of what I already knew was coming. The phone rang twice before my mother answered. Linda, I'm busy. What is it? Her tone was already irritated. I took a deep breath. Mom, I have the flu, a high fever. The doctor says I need complete bed rest. I was wondering if you could watch Noah for a few days. Silence. Then a sigh. Well, the timing couldn't be worse, she said. Caroline's wedding is in 2 months, and we have so much to do. The dress, the invitations, the flowers. Mom, please, I whispered. I don't have anyone else. You're always like this, she snapped, always causing problems at the worst time. Caroline's wedding is more important than your little problems, Linda. My throat tightened. My fever was so high I could barely think straight. But even in my foggy state, the words hurt. Then, in the background, I heard another voice. Caroline. Is she whining again? My sister's voice was sharp. Linda, you made your choices. This is what happens when you have a useless child. I froze. A useless child? Noah. My beautiful, smart, kind son. How dare you? I choked out. Caroline scoffed. Mom and Dad have cleaned up after your messes for years. But not this time. I won't let you ruin my wedding. Then another voice. My father. Enough, he said. Hang up. And just like that, the call ended. I sat there, phone still clutched in my hand, staring at the screen as silent tears rolled down my face. My mother, my father, my sister. Not one of them cared. The fever was unbearable, but the pain of rejection, that was worse. Then, knocking at the door. For a moment, I thought, maybe they changed their minds. I pulled the door open. It wasn't them. Jenna stood there. Linda, you shouldn't even be standing, she scolded gently. Get back to bed. I felt my lip tremble. But Noah. I already called his school, Jenna said firmly. I'm picking him up. You need to rest. Tears welled in my eyes. But you have your own family. Friends are family too, Linda, she said softly. And at that moment, I realized something. I did have a family, just not the one I was born into. That night, as I lay in bed, I reached for my phone and sent a message. Judith, we need to talk about my sister's wedding reservation. And with that, everything changed. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from my parents, no calls, no messages. Not that I expected one. Jenna took care of Noah while I was sick, and for the first time in years, I felt cared for. Not like a burden, not like an embarrassment. Just a person, a mother who needed help, and a friend who gave it freely. By the time I recovered, life returned to normal. Or at least my version of normal. But then, there was a knock at the door. It was loud, frantic, desperate. I froze. Through the door, I heard my mother's voice. Linda, please, open up. My heart pounded. I had spent years craving their approval, their love. And now, suddenly, they were here? Behind me, Noah looked up from his book. Mom, is Grandma crying? I hesitated, then turned to him. Noah, sweetheart, can you wait in your room for a little bit? He nodded and wheeled himself away. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. There stood my mother, her eyes red and swollen. My father, stiff and tense. And Caroline, my perfect, untouchable sister, completely undone. Tears streamed down her face, her makeup smudged. For the first time in my life, Caroline looked small. Linda, my mother gasped. Please, we need your help. I crossed my arms. What's wrong? The venue canceled, my father said, his voice tight. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. Willow Creek Manor, Caroline whimpered. They backed out. The wedding is in 2 months and every other venue is booked. And? I asked, tilting my head. Silence. Finally, my father cleared his throat. They said the special discount was because of you, and you revoked it. I didn't say anything. I just let the words sink in. 2 weeks ago, I had sent a message to my old friend Judith, who owned the venue. I told her exactly what had happened. Judith didn't hesitate. Caroline's wedding was no longer a priority at Willow Creek Manor. Now, here they were, begging. Please, Linda, my mother whispered. We have nowhere else to go. We need you. I let the words hang in the air before answering. What do you expect from worthless me? Caroline flinched as if I had slapped her. My father sighed, rubbing his face. Linda, we were wrong. I studied his expression, regret, shame. I had never seen that in his eyes before. We're sorry, my mother added, her voice breaking. Please forgive us. I exhaled slowly, then said, There are conditions. They all looked up, desperate. Anything, Caroline said quickly. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. First, an apology. A real one. To me, and to Noah. Caroline swallowed hard. I'll apologize. Not just words, I said. Actions. My father nodded solemnly. What else? He asked. For the next 2 months. I said, every Friday through Sunday, Noah stays with you. Caroline's mouth fell open. You're joking, she sputtered. I have wedding plans. Bradley and I need time together. Then I guess you don't need a venue, I replied, shrugging. She turned to our parents, as if expecting them to argue, but they stayed silent. After a long pause, my father nodded. All right. My mother swallowed hard. We can do that. Caroline looked like she wanted to scream, but she didn't. What else? My father asked. 10% of the wedding budget, I said, goes to a Bright Future, a local charity for children with disabilities. My mother gasped. That's thousands of dollars, Linda. I crossed my arms. Can't be harder than raising a disabled child alone, can it? Silence. My father looked at my mother. We'll do it. And one last thing, I added. They all turned to me. Noah gets an invitation, and he's the ring bearer. Caroline inhaled sharply. Then she nodded. All right. I didn't move. And? I prompted. Caroline's lip trembled. Then, finally, she lowered her head and whispered, Noah, I'm sorry. What I said was horrible. You're not worthless. You never were. I searched her face for sincerity. There it was. Fine, I said. Then I'll talk to Judith. Relief flooded their expressions. But, I added, if you break your promise, I'll make one call, and the venue is gone. They nodded quickly. 2 days later, I got another call. This time, it wasn't my mother demanding something. It was my father. Linda, he said slowly, do you think Noah would like to learn how to fish? I almost dropped my phone. For the first time in my life, my father was reaching out. Not for me, for my son. The gardens of Willow Creek Manor glowed in the sunshine. The air smelled of lilacs and roses, and the sound of fountains filled the space. I adjusted Noah's bow tie. Nervous? A little, he admitted, looking at himself in the mirror. But I think I can do it. You'll be the best ring bearer, I assured him. A knock sounded at the door. My father. He had changed in the past 2 months. His posture was the same, his voice still deep, but something was different. Warmth. Ready? He asked Noah. My son nodded. Yeah, Grandpa. My father smiled. Then let's go. As Noah wheeled down the aisle, heads turned. Some people whispered, but Noah didn't flinch. And neither did my father, who walked beside him, proud. Caroline, in her white dress, stood beside her fiancé. For the first time, she wasn't looking down at me. She was looking at me, with respect, with gratitude. A letter arrived, an invitation, not to a wedding, to a welcome party. When I showed Noah, his eyes widened. Mom, are we getting a cousin? That weekend, we went to Caroline and Bradley's home, and in the center of the room sat a little girl in a wheelchair. Linda, Noah, Caroline said softly, this is Emma, our daughter. I froze. You're adopted, Caroline said, smiling. She has Down syndrome and a spinal disability. We met her through the charity, and we knew she was meant to be ours. Noah wheeled forward and grinned. Hi, Emma. We're wheelchair buddies now. Emma smiled shyly and waved. I turned to Caroline, overwhelmed. Why? I whispered. She swallowed, hard. Because of you. And because of Noah. I was awful, Linda. But he changed me. And now, I understand what real family means. Tears welled in my eyes. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up, who stayed, and who chose love, over and over again. And for the first time in my life, I had a family. A real one.